Hello, everyone out there. I ran the countdown, and the countdown ended, and then I still saw my go live button. So I'm apparently not on my game today. I apologize for that. Um, the This is You Want Answers, episode 11. Thank you for joining me today. We've had a little bit of weather here in the Midwest, and so I was wondering if we were going to have power when this show kicked off. And it usually we don't lose power. I've been here 17 years, and I think we've lost power 3 times. But every now and then, when we get the really heavy rains, whatever happens to my cable internet access, sometimes it gets a little wonky. So if you lose me a little bit here and there, it's probably the weather. And about 45 minutes before showtime, my Mac had a hard freeze and just, and so we'll kick this thing off and hopefully we'll all get through it. But friend of mine is down in Disney right now, and with his family, and he sent a picture update on Facebook that they got to see a SpaceX launch live yesterday. And it's like, I remember I took my family down to Disney a long time ago, and we were going to see a shuttle launch. And for whatever reason, I don't remember, they scrapped the launch. And so we didn't get to see it while we were down there. So I've never actually seen a launch live, and I'm hoping to get that chance one day. But kicking off this show, I was following I follow a couple different people that are into orbital mechanics. Ever since my little man got interested in space, we've been watching YouTube videos, and I'm fascinated by how object X and object Y can find each other in space and dock. So I've been in all my spare time studying some orbital mechanics, and so anyway, so I follow somebody on Twitter that shared something that kind of blew my mind. And so I wanted to ask of the audience here, can all of the other planets in our solar system fit within the orbit of the moon? So you've got your Earth and you've got your moon, and in the space between Earth and moon, does everybody fit? And so I guess since I said it blew my mind, that's probably a giveaway that absolutely they all fit. And it's crazy, right? Because Jupiter is so big. Now, they say you can fit 1,000 Earths inside of Jupiter, and then 1,000 Jupiters can fit inside the sun. So the scale is crazy. So how can it really fit in between? It's well, that's the difference when you go from diameter, which is 2 dimensions, into 3 dimensions. Diameter is not volume, and so it works out to where all the planets lined up. Obviously Saturn doesn't have its rings, but all the planets lined up, they fit. And I think it's within 2,000 miles, as long as you're looking at the average distance of the moon. At apogee, it fits with a lot of space. At perigee, it actually, there's going to be some planetary collisions. And so, but anyway, I thought that was fascinating. So I wanted to share with the greater audience about some of the love I have for all things space. Before we get into our content today, I want to tell a little bit about what we got coming up. June 3rd, next week, we have DevCentral Connects right back here, 12:30 Pacific. We had a scheduled show. Our guest dropped out, so we're backfilling that now. I don't have a topic for you yet, but come back next week. We'll have something exciting to share with you. And then John on June 10th is for Security Sidebar. It's going to talk a little 5G security. And then on the 17th, I'm actually going to be on vacation. My boys and I are going to go do some fun things. And so Peter's going to step into the co-host slot with John. And they're going to talk to Wade Baker from the Scientia Institute. So it should be a good show. All right. So let's talk about some certification stuff. And I want to kick that off by an article I released today. It's actually going to be a guest author series from Alex. And I listened to some pronunciations online, and they were all different. So I'm sure I'll mess it up too. But Tigius is how I would phonetically pronounce it. I'm sure that's way wrong. But nonetheless, Alex is F5 certified. and he's a trainer and a consultant, and he just wanted to share the experience around the experience of certification. So, we're titling this series the F5 Certifications Mega Meta Series. So it's really just kind of around how you take tests, not what's on the tests. And so if that's of interest to you, and I think it is, because it's one thing to just know the information, but taking tests is stressful. Preparing for tests is stressful. And so, this is a series that's going to kind of address how you handle all those things. And so if you have tips from your experience certification, as he's releasing these articles, go share them out on DevCentral in the comments, because he has one perspective on the journey. You have a different perspective, and I think the more perspectives we add to add to the knowledge base, the better off we all are. So thank you, Alex, for contributing the article series. We're going to be releasing these about, I think, I'll check with Leslie. I think it's one a week. She put it all in the calendar, but I have not looked at the calendar. But I think it's like we're going to drop these like once a week. So there's 8 in total, and I hope you get a lot out of it. Thank you, Alex, for contributing that. And we have a comment. Oh yeah, cool. Desdemona, exciting that this will be a series. Yeah, it's going to be good. And so as you read the articles, as you consume them every Thursday, there you go, Leslie. Thank you. Every Thursday they're going to be dropping. So look forward to that. And we might even get a little Ken and Heidi call outs in some of these articles, to where, as Alex is sharing his experience, because it is his experience, he's not coming from the F5 perspective. So if we have a little bit of clarification that we might make on a particular article, there'll be a call out box to where Ken shares a thought, or Heidi shares a thought, or I share a thought. And Peter actually had some experience with certification years ago when we kind of did it as a team, and I might throw a couple of those nuggets on his behalf into some of these articles. So really think it's going to be great. Share what you know in the comments under the articles. It'll benefit everybody. All right. The next thing that I wanted to share is that as I was looking for some AFM stuff, because I was looking at the blueprint for 401, and the blueprint is pretty basic. Like, they don't really go into a whole lot of detail. They just share at a very, very high level. Here's the expectation. And so this is a few years old. It's October from 2017, and I think his name is Julian. He doesn't really say what his name is, but the link there is blog.tcpipwarrior.com, and he has an article here where he's talking about his preparation for the 401. And so I wanted to, give him a shout out, because I was, just looking for some AFM things to talk about in certification type questions, because AFM is not a product I've worked extensively with. And so I just wanted to kind of dig in on that and see what we could learn today. I feel like I should have a little, kids ukulele in my hands and like kind of like sing-songy that. And like it's like preschool talk time, only we're talking about TCP/IP, which is definitely not a preschool topic. All right, so let's get into some questions. And the first one here is, what's the big difference between AFM's ADC and firewall modes? And so we have 4 options here. ADC mode is default permit, and the firewall mode is default deny. And then ADC mode is default deny. Firewall mode is default permit. So we got the opposite cases there. And then we have 2 here. ADC mode requires a special AFM license. Firewall mode requires a special AFM license. Okay. So just kind of like 2 pairs of opposite. And you'll see that sometimes on tests, where they really just want to know that the piece of information, but they're not going to really stretch you in those. F5 exams are a little bit different, but since I wrote this and I'm not that smart, I created pairs on this. And so if you're looking at these, this one comes out pretty quickly that, ADC mode from a firewall mode perspective would be default permit. Firewall mode is default deny. But wait, when I look at that, and I was like, that is the right answer. ADC mode is default permit and the firewall mode is default deny. But we say that the ADC, the big IP, is a default denied device. So what gives? And the difference there is from a traffic perspective, and it's for traffic not matching a rule. And so ADC mode, if there's not a rule or whatever, the default option there is to permit. And so anytime you're going into a firewall test and there's a default permit, that's probably wrong, because the whole point of a firewall is to deny access. And so that should have been a softball of a question. All right. Okay, so next question here we have, what is the match order for AFM's rules? And so we have, and the point there in that little subheader is least to most specific, because sometimes you'll have gotcha questions on exams. Again, it's not the intent for F5 certifications to have gotcha questions. Go back and watch the psychometrician hour with Ken and Heidi. That's not the goal of testing. It's really just, are you a minimally qualified candidate to perform these things? We're not trying to get you. We're just trying to assess, knowledge. And so here, it's various versions of the same things, right? So we know that the match order for these rules is some combination here of global, virtual, and self, route domain, global drop. That's interesting. We got global and global drop. Why do they name things so closely together? And if we once you dig through these, the right answer there is global, route domain, then virtual and self, and then global drop. And so, you're going from a very, very wide context and you're getting closer and closer. Pasilva, thank you. We got the big link there. That's not something I guess you're going to scratch down on a piece of paper, but you've got it in text, and so good to go. Yeah, so you're going from a very wide to a very narrow in the specific ones, and then of course global drop there at the end. All right. Well, I have to keep touching my PowerPoint in order to advance it. All right, so here's the next one. What is an AFM context? What's a context? I think of context from big IP land. It's like I have a client-side context, I have a server-side context, and so it's like what is the perspective that you have on something, and so that doesn't necessarily help me with these answers as I'm evaluating how I would come to a list here. Come to an answer. And so AFM context, is it a resource manager? Well, if this was a context manager in Python, that would be the right answer. But that's not the right answer here, I don't think. A protocol profile, a port list, probably not. A big IP system access point, that would be a category. But when you talk about that matching range, that is, how are you accessing the big IP system? Is it through a self IP? Is it through a virtual? Is it through a route in a route domain and all that kind of stuff? So the context there is, how are you accessing the big IP? What kind of object is that? And so the context is related to that. Okay, that is the certification journey part of this. If you have any other things that you would like to talk about from a certification standpoint, drop comments in here and I can cover those in future shows. I like to kind of move around in all the different tests between the 101 and the 201, and then all the 301 tests, and then even up into the 401 and the 402. So if you have specific areas of interest where you would like me to look at topics and all that around that, and just kind of think about the way questions might be asked or answered, share those either here or drop me an email. Okay, so for some DevCentral Q&A, here is the first one, and this is actually back to certification, right? Keys and answers to F5 practice exams portal. So in T. Srinivas's defense, he was not looking for a dump in the traditional standpoint of somebody showing up in a forum. Hey, do you have a dump for this test? Because I want to just memorize stuff and pass it. He's really he took a test and he wants to kind of think through and verify what was in there. And so my feedback to him, but also feedback to everyone who is either through laziness or just, they want the answers to the practice, don't go find them, don't look for them, don't ask for them, don't share them. All the practice tests, the production tests, you are, you're under NDA, that you sign as a candidate in the certification program to not share that information. And so whether it's a practice test, whether it's a production test, just don't do it. You can get that NDA information in your candidate portal. I put the support article there, for, you really just don't want to be caught with or caught asking for that kind of information, because it hurts everyone, to get that information out into the wild. So don't do it. All right. So the title of of our show today was for, don't sleep on XFF. And so for those who don't know what XFF is, that's the name of the HTTP header, for X forwarded for. And it's used for, different levels of proxies to be able to, get a best guess at who the source IP is of the client that's coming into your system. So you as a very source client way back, in rural West Virginia, you hit up, ESPN.com, and you're trying to check on the Mountaineers and whether they won their football game against any of their Big 12 opponents. And so you make a request, and that might go through several proxies on the way to the server. And so what some proxies will do is they will rewrite that header to the latest IP in the chain. And some will just, add on IPs. And so what that header is in normal operation, it's one or more in a list separated by commas, IP addresses. And so the servers can then take that IP information, and then they can, track you or do any kind of analytics where their customers are from. Maybe they're not tracking you specifically, but they're just trying to get an idea of how people are coming to them and where they're coming from, and where they might send advertising dollars in the future, that kind of thing. And or they might have they might be a bank, and they're saying, well, we're a local bank, we're not an international bank, and we don't have any customers in any of these countries. And if they are a customer and they happen to be traveling there, it's not really safe for us to allow them through. So they may just, block you based on IP address, on where you're coming from. In any event, that's what the purpose is of the X forwarded for headers. And there's just, it's a technical term, gazillion different headers that are supported in HTTP natively, but you can also just insert your own headers that aren't really standard or known by anybody. And as long as it's formatted in a way that HTTP understands, it'll forward and even systems like Big IP, as long as it's a properly formatted part of HTTP, it will not do anything with that and allow it through, and then the server can act on it, or if the server doesn't know about that header, it'll just ignore it. And so what this question was for is like, somebody's actually trying to use the header to inject SQL. And that was kind of like, well, that's pretty interesting, because I all the time I hear, and it's pounded at conferences and all that. It's like, developers. You need to sanitize your inputs. You need to make sure that if you're asking for an email address, only an email address is in that header. If you're asking for an IP address, only an IP address is in that header. And you get that from on the content side, maybe developer from the standpoint of the infrastructure, maybe the web server or your application server that sits outside of the content. You've got developers for that too. But it's one of those things where you think about the payload, not the headers, as being vulnerable. But the headers are just as vulnerable if the way that you're acting on the information is dangerous. And so, the point here is sanitize everything, even your headers. And the question specifically by Dave was, how do I make sure that's just IP instead of SQL? And And so Daniel was response there rightly was, hey, enable the signature in the ASM or advanced WAF to block that because it will. And it's not necessarily just that header. It's like all headers. I shouldn't have any SQL coming in my HTTP headers. And so, enable those signatures and block, and you're good to go. If you don't have ASM or advanced WAF, I had suggested just a rudimentary check for non-IP information. It's like, hey, if in this string or in any of these strings, because if it's separated by a comma, you can iterate through that. Then, check to see if there's an IP in here at all. And if there's not, go ahead and block it. He fleshed that out. Daniel followed up on mine. It's like, hey, we can actually check for the presence of it being specifically or explicitly an IP address. And then, and his solution would absolutely work if it's a single IP address. He would need to add in a for each loop there if he had more than one IP address. But I'd answered like 6:30 in the morning, and then I was like, oh wait, I had added. It's like, well, you kind of need to evaluate whether that 255 is octet is a mask or not. And it's like, actually on the server side, you don't care if it's a mask or not because you're not actually networking. And so that's a foggy brain waking up, and it's like just overthinking things. But it was definitely interesting. And if you want to go look at the attack itself, that link there, the Outpost 24 link, I can share that. And that is, this is the actual MySQL that a backend SQL statement that would be vulnerable for that. And it's like, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to select username and password from this user database table where these things, and then I'm going to do the IP address, and then the IP adder. There's a function, and that function is just reading the string coming out of that header, period. There's no sanitation on that at all. And so if you have SQL in that header instead of the IP adder, well, then that's where bad stuff happens. And so, there's a reason SQL injection is near the top or at the top of the OAuth top 10 every time it comes out because of stuff like that. Because, that's easy. Sanitizing takes a little bit extra work. And so, that's why we have some of the issues we have. All right. Moving on, and if you guys have any crazy stories about header injections, I'd love to hear them. Here is a question. Actually, it wasn't on DevCentral; it was on GitHub against the F5 Common Python library. And real quick on that, the F5 Common Python has been around for many years. I worked on it and maintained it with a group of people for a while. Most of those people have moved on from F5. A couple of them are still around, but are on other projects, and there's just not a development team around to keep that updated. And so whereas it's still available and useful and you can use it, there are flaws in the library, and there's newer functionality in all of the different TMSH branches of /net /utils /LTM /GTM, and so on, that have never been built into the library because they weren't asked for. And so feature requests are coming in, issues are coming in, and if it's an issue that people just don't know how to use it, I'll usually jump on that and try and help them. And this is one of those that I tried to help on, and I was like, I was like, I actually don't think the way the library is written that we can do that. And it's because the way that the F5 SDK was written, it's built around the ability to add a static ARP. And so you actually have to have a named object with which to pull stats from. And so it we would have to rewrite how we've done things without just pulling stats back through the bash utility. And so, but, with F5 Common Python not really being under active development as much anymore, we do have one of our MVPs, Leonardo Souza, wrote Big Rest, and it's a different way of thinking about the implementation than what we did, but it's actually I like it a lot because it's simpler, it's more direct and intuitive, and a lot of things just work. And so one of those things that just works is being able to pull stats on objects, and it was super easy. If you go out to the issue there at the top on my screen, that one Yeah, Peter shared it there. And you can go and see the Big REST implementation of that. And so most of the code samples that I'm doing now on CodeShare are using Big REST. So if you're thinking about getting into imperative work on the Big IP, I would highly suggest Big REST versus F5 Common Python. If you're already using F5 Common Python and there's holes for you that are pain points that I might be able to solve with a day of code, I'm willing to do that. We haven't archived it yet. It's just a it's not dead, but it's it's in the intensive care. So but I'm, like I said, if you're in a pinch and you need something, I'm willing to help. Also, if you want, you can fork it and then build on yourself from there and fix it yourself as well. So either way, I'm willing as I have time. But the better route going forward on the imperative side is Big REST. And on the declarative side, it's using the Terraform modules, the Ansible modules, and using the F5 automation toolchain. That's the way to go if you're going to go all in on declarative. And got a couple more minutes here. Oh, see, I forgot my own slides. You don't have to go out and look at the issue. There's the implementation right there of Big REST. So pretty simple. You import the Big IP module. My super secret username and password there of admin, and then you pull down the ARPs with the common CRUD stuff, and just do a show command against the ARP, and then it pulls back the ARP table, and then for each one, I'm just getting the properties of the IP itself. So there you go. All right, this is another one. Upload SSL certificates and keys via the REST API. This was interesting because the question is actually it's a long time ago, and somebody was switching from SOAP to REST, which was interesting because I remember a day where all I did was SOAP, and then this new thing called REST came out, and it's like, oh, well, that's a simpler way to do things, and I don't have to think about the WSDL definitions of all the iControl endpoints and load those into my code. Oh, did you guys hear that big old boom? The big old boom of thunder out there. But we're still live, so that's good. And so this one, so he was looking for the way to do it in REST. And at the very beginning, when REST was coming out, there were different endpoints. There was like a sys crypto endpoint, I think, but then they went to a sys file and then did SSL keys and certs. And the crypto ones had off permission issues with remote leave thunder. It's like that from the Cars movie, Thunder Kachuga. There were some auth issues with crypto, so then they had the file SSL cert keys. Anyway, long aside, just to say, I found the original script for uploading. It's like, really just wondering, how do I upload things? And so I found the original upload code, and I shared that. And it's like, really, that's not the best way to do it. You really should have something a little bit more robust. And so, again, I shared a way to do it with Big REST. But also, as a bonus, and this is why I shared this one for this week, is that I've had some questions about the Let's Encrypt automatic cert. So it'll go out and grab certs, and then it'll automatically upload to the Big IP. It'll use a transaction to swap out the certs and keys in an SSL profile, so you don't have to manage that, and it just takes care of all of that. I had that for Acme version 1 for Let's Encrypt, and now that's been deprecated and it's going away soon. So I'm working on an update to that whole thing, and I'm actually updating a lot because my DNS provider API has changed. Big IP stuff has changed. The Python library I'm using has changed. So, I mean, there's so much changes. Like I'm just doing updates, but it's almost a completely new rewrite. So I'm working on that in spare time. Hopefully I'll get that out in the next couple of weeks. And we're almost out of time, but actually we are out of time, but I'm going to keep going here for a couple minutes and then we'll get out of here. In fact, let me see. I'm almost done. So the REST API query. This one's like, we're going to go old school to like one of our very first Whiteboard Wednesday videos. But the thing was, it's like, how do I get pool member server status via the REST? So Alex BCT provided the curl version to do that. The key points on that when you're not looking at the GUI is you need the session and the state attributes. And so, the session is whether you have enabled that or disabled that. And then the state is whether the monitor has enabled that or disabled that. And so it uses those two things together in order to establish whether something is available. And so on that, John drew up this pretty drawing on the whiteboard for one of the very first videos that we did with Whiteboard Wednesday, Lightboard lessons. And kind of going through the different representations of what you can see as a status for a node, a pool member, a pool, and a virtual server. And so the key there to the right, you've got the monitor up, admin up is a green circle, monitor up but admin down is a black circle. The yellow triangle is a threshold violation. So if you put a pool or a node, if you put a connection limit on any of those objects and you violate that, then that's where your yellow triangle comes up. And then you've got your monitor down, admin down is your diamond, in that it's available from an administrative perspective, but the object itself is not responding to monitors. And then the monitor down, admin down is your black diamond, and then your blue rectangle or blue square is the monitor's unknown. So it could be applied already, and it's just, maybe you have a 90-second timeout, and so it's in the process of getting that first monitor information, or you don't have a monitor applied at all, and so it's just going to say, best effort. I'm going to send it, but I have no idea if it's going to work, and I'm not going to tell you it's going to work because you haven't applied a monitor. So anyway, I find that table very helpful to reference a lot. So I put it in the deck, and that is the show, people. We are done. I hope that you found something useful today. I apologize for my countdown being out of sorts. And again, next week we have DevCentral Connects 12:30 Pacific. We'll get that promotional material out Tuesday. At the latest, we got holiday on Monday, so it will be Tuesday, and we look forward to doing that. And then John, again, 5G security on Security Sidebar on the 10th, and then Peter and John are going to be bringing Wade Baker Scientia Institute to you on the 17th, because I'm going to be out hanging with my boys. So thank you all for joining me this week. It was a pleasure. And we will see you out there in the community. If you like content like this, please subscribe, and have a great weekend, everyone.